Hi, everybody. It's Joe Chaffee on this Thursday, the Ides of March, 6:01 p.m. Eastern Time, and we have meteorologist Joe Rayo with us tonight.
It's the Ides of March. It's also the day when the buzzards return to Hinckley, Ohio.
Yes, they do.
I think that's Ohio's version of the, well, of course, you and I, the big day, March 19th, St. Joseph's Day.
St. Joseph's Day.
The sparrows return to,
Capistrano.
the swallows.
The swallows.
The sparrows return to Capistrano. The
Those
swallows
return
return
to Capistrano.
It's all right. I'm not into birds all that much. But,
No.
But in any case.
And they stop for cannolis along the way.
Yes, exactly.
All right, so we actually have a bit of a break here, Joe, after getting three supersized nor'easters in 10 days, and each one did something different to areas of the Northeast. We've got a bit of a break period. We also have, by the way, we're going to talk about tonight the next weather system that is very complex, and if you think we have it figured out, we don't. And
No.
we also have some weather going on in Europe. They're getting another beast from the east, as they call it there in the UK. It's a bit of a mini version of it this time around, unlike the one a few weeks ago. But they're going to see some very late winter snow this weekend.
I can't speak for Europe. You're the expert locally here on that, but I don't think we're going to be extracting the word cold or chilly out of the forecast locally here for a number of days to come. There's absolutely no sign of, well, actually, you think about it, February was one of the warmest, if not the warmest Februaries on record, at least in Lower Hudson Valley. February was more like March, and March certainly is a lot more, seems like February. And I don't see any break until maybe the end of the month or maybe the beginning of April.
But I got to double check on this. But for New York City itself, for Central Park, which records go back to 1869, I don't even think this February made the top 10. I got to double check that. But it was, I think, 6 and change above normal. And
in the Hudson Valley, I think unofficially now, Westchester Airport, 7.1 degrees above normal, which is absurd.
Is that the database that goes all the way back?
Well, their database is not as prolific as Central Park. As you just mentioned, 1869 for them, but I think at Westchester Airport, the records go back to 1951. However, there was a gentleman back in the 1800s, the late 1800s, that was like the earliest version of a cooperative weather observer, who had like a whole slew of records for 30 or 40 years. But in any case, no matter which way you break it down, it was a very warm month of February. And now here we are in March, and all people are saying is, get it out. Come on. They want spring, but it doesn't look like spring is going to happen anytime soon.
Parts of the Northeast have been getting snow on and off for days now, and there are some incredible snow amounts in some places up in Vermont and through upstate northeastern New York. A lot of lake effect has been going on.
Whiteface Mountain, one of the ski resorts, picked up, I think, in the last
almost
24
3
hours,
feet.
Almost 3 feet of snow.
Amazing. And I've seen some pictures up from southern Vermont where snow is up almost to the rooftops in some places.
Yeah, it's a funny thing. In Vermont, they have the Green Mountains. In New Hampshire, they have the White Mountains. But it appears right now that both Vermont and New Hampshire have white mountains with all the snow that's fallen.
We have action going on in the west too. We've got some rain and snow showers up the Rockies, and also in California we've got some rain and snow that's coming in as energy from the west is going to be coming eastward. One system heading to our south this weekend that's going to be very, very weak, and then of course everybody already asking about next Tuesday, and going to pull up the teleconnections because I think they can illustrate what's happening here. You know, we seem to have the atmosphere still kind of pulled in extreme directions. That Pacific North America index is about to crash to strongly negative and just basically stay that way through almost to the end of the month. The big change is going to come apparently in the North Atlantic Oscillation. The block is strong, but it's going to be weakening, and the index climbs up toward the neutral line right on March 21st or so. And usually when you see big moves in these indices in either direction, when they crash from positive to neutral or when they run from neutral up to the zero line, something tries to happen in here, and that's times perfectly with how models are, indicating for Tuesday, Wednesday, possibly into Thursday, depending on how this works out. And the EPO is very negative, and that, in fact, it goes all the way down to the bottom of the index, which this time of year is minus 200. That explains the cold air that we're going to be dealing with through the middle part of next week. So, yes, I agree with you. By the way, Shelly Man Studios, bring on spring, if only. This is really, I don't know about you, but it's just long. The cold, when March is cold, it just makes winter too long.
A lot of people were complaining about even today. Today we had temperatures that were in the 40s, but the winds made it feel like it was in the 30s. And I've been saying all day, if you think today was bad, you wait until tomorrow. Tomorrow we're talking about, at least in the lower Hudson Valley, highs that maybe, if we're lucky, maybe will briefly touch 40. They'll be in the 30s all day. But we have winds tomorrow that are expected to gust to 30, 35 miles an hour, which will make the chill factor all through the afternoon feel like it's in the 20s. And the normal high temperature at this time of the year now should be hitting 50 with some regularity in the mid-afternoon hours, and we're not going to be anywhere near that.
The odd thing is in New York City this month so far, and a few people have pointed this out, it hasn't gone under 30 at night, which is interesting. The days have been cold. I mean,
Right.
we've been cold in the daytime, but at night, it's been. They haven't seen. I don't know what the low was this morning, but at least through yesterday morning, they had not gone into the 20s.
Well, one friend of mine who is a very prolific, far more than I am, stargazer, assiduous amateur astronomer who lives in Stormville, New York. And he's a very well-known expert on comets. His name is John Bortle, and he was complaining to me about the fact that he has not had a single night this whole month of March that has been clear. And I think that may be the key to why New York City hasn't dropped much below 30. The cloud cover, which acts as an atmospheric blanket, plus the fact that New York in itself is a heat island. So that's probably why it has not gone below 30 in New York. But it's been night after night after night of cloud cover. And tonight may be the first real clear night after we get through the evening hours. We've had rain and snow showers from a disturbance passing off to our south. But it should clear out nicely by later tonight. And finally we'll see that blanket taken away. And maybe tonight will be the night when even in New York it'll fall below 30.
I put up the new GFS, which is coming out. It's in progress. Now that we're on daylight saving time, it's an hour later. Usually, by the time I go on here at 6 o'clock on the live stream, when we're on standard time, it's all done. But we're gonna. I figured at this point we might have it far enough out that we could get it at least to the time frame of the next system. But starting at the beginning, you can see the problem in the east. We've got this big upper low that's sitting east of between New Brunswick and Newfoundland. And it keeps rotating these spokes around. That dark blue patch you see over New Jersey and Long Island is the latest spoke that's going through here with some rain and snow showers out there at the moment. And then you can see all that energy out in the west with another big upper low and storm system that's off the coast of Oregon, and that's bringing in waves of energy as well. So moving forward, as we go into tomorrow, you can see there's a closed upper air low in northern Kansas. So that's low pressure that's coming out into the plains. But the problem is the flow in the east is so dominant and so strong. There's even another spoke that's coming around here. The upper low basically reforms to the west over Maine. This is going to bring a cold shot of air for Sunday into the first part of next week. But it basically squashes that first system. Right. So other than cloud, it's gone by the time we get to Sunday. But there's the next energy there in the west, which is much more impressive. And this is one of those tough situations, Joe, where you've got this upper air storm just to the east and a trough to the east, and it has to get out of the way far enough to give that next system approaching some room. Otherwise, it will get squashed like the weekend one. So models have been kind of groping with whether is it going to pull out quickly or is it going to pull out somewhat and leave leave a piece of it behind. That's going to be important in terms of how the system winds up tracking.
Well, aside from the NAM, which doesn't go out as far as the middle of next week yet, 84 hours, but the other three models, the Canadian model or the GEM, not the RGEM, the RGEM only goes out to 48, but the global Canadian model, the GFS, and the European model, when we look at what is supposedly going to happen in the middle of next week, all three of those models go their own separate ways and have their own separate solutions. So who's to say what's going to happen?
There's the upper low now. We're into Monday afternoon. There'll be a surface storm. I'll switch to the surface in a second, but it's moving right along. Watch the action off the East Coast. You've got, let me just back it up. So here's, Sunday into Monday. It starts to pull out, and then another upper low drops down into eastern Canada. So there you have this system now by Tuesday morning is moving through northeastern Kentucky. See how it's trying to move northeastward.
Right.
You have this upper low dropping to south, and then you've got this other energy now that's coming into focus from North Dakota down into Louisiana, complicating things here.
Right.
I was saying to someone today. Usually when we get the models showing back-to-back systems very, very close or in the longer range, it seldom happens.
Right.
And then I thought to myself, well, we just had 3 nor'easters in 10 days. So, if there's a time where something unusual is going to happen, this seems it.
It's like a mishmash, a morass of energy splattered, if you will, all over the central and eastern United States. And the computer models are trying in their best way to try to, the integration, so to speak. It's tough now for them because this is basically what the models are guessing is going to happen.
Right.
From a system that's coming in off of the Pacific where there's not much data to work with initially. And, this is...
And you have
the
so
problem.
many players this time around. It's
Yeah.
not like you're dealing with one short wave or one trough. You've got so many players in so many different places that are each one changes a little bit. It changes the whole profile. Now, this is as far as out we have so far, which is to early Wednesday morning, 2 a.m. Wednesday. That first system is probably sitting what's left of it in the upper air. You could probably just kind of pick it out in central Pennsylvania, but then the trough to the west of it looks like it's getting stronger as it comes east.
Right.
And we'll go back and see how it rectifies this on the surface. And we'll put that on here. So, okay, so I already we'll pass the weekend. This is Friday night, so we'll pass through the weekend. You can see how that first wave just dies.
Just pushes it right to our south.
Yeah, and it weakens.
Right.
And then here comes the second low. That now is, each run of the model seems to be taking it a little further south. So we've got a low moving across Oklahoma and Arkansas into Tennessee. So we're now into Monday night. This is now Tuesday. Low pressure trying to run toward West Virginia. Actually drops down into western North Carolina. There's the wave. Looks like the GFS is kind of like today's European. The European wanted to sort of suppress it a bit to the south. But now you've got the second energy that's swinging around. So suddenly you got all this snow back through Kentucky and Indiana and Ohio. Low pressure sitting off the North Carolina coast, snow into central New Jersey. And look at that. It just sits there.
Right.
As it waits for the next trough to spin around. Actually, what probably happens, Joe, is there's the lead low here that forms and redevelops. That goes out, and then you get probably another wave that develops on there. But this looks very much like, this would suggest that really not much happens here on Tuesday into early Wednesday, and then you have to see how that next trough, how it comes out with that low sitting off the Delaware coast and snow on the northern fringe.
And this is the danger of going with a forecast of a specific storm, let's say 5 or more days out, because I know that the focus has been on Tuesday, because Tuesday's the first day of spring, and we may have another nor'easter on Tuesday, and we may have more snow, or maybe snow and rain, or whatever like that. And so now what we're facing is a saga, if you will, that could start Tuesday in one way, shape, or form, and continue through Wednesday, and then continue on into Thursday as well.
One of the things I think, at least at this point, we could say with a fair amount of confidence is that this upper air structure that we're dealing with doesn't seem to lend to the idea of an intense cyclone developing with very low pressures like we saw with the first three, particularly with the first one and the third one, maybe
Right.
a little bit less so than the second. But on the other hand, while this might be a weaker low in terms of pressure, there is a pretty good easterly fetch there of moisture. You've got a cold high to the north, so you might have a decent amount of precip that develops with this, and a decent amount of overrunning.
It's going to be, the overrunning is the thing. You could have, you don't even have to have a vigorous amount of overrunning with a strong high like that to the north. Sometimes, and I think I mentioned this in the past, sometimes you don't have to focus on the actual disturbance or low pressure. Sometimes you look at the high. The high can sometimes be more of a key in what you get in terms of precipitation than the actual storm, and this may be one of those cases. But then again, we talked about back in the early part of the wintertime, the 2,500 mile long warm front.
Yes.
And this is not a warm front, but this is a very stretched out or elongated low pressure system, and it seems to cover a large amount of territory, and is going to take its sweet time in moving on through because of the blocking high to the north.
And we should mention, for those of you who are on the West Coast, the way the models are playing out, it looks like a pretty good size rainstorm here coming into the west. And you can see it here sweeping into the edge of the frame as we go into Wednesday night. This is for Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Time.
What you just said kind of reminds me of the synoptic discussion from the great megalopolitan blizzard that hit in 1983. In fact, the forecaster that night or that afternoon was a gentleman by the name of Poole, Poole. I don't know what his first name is. I'm sure he's retired by now. But he spent literally all of the discussion on the blizzard and what was happening in the east. And the final sentence, he says, "Oh, for you folks out on the West Coast, we haven't forgotten about you."
Yeah.
The significant storm coming your way in the next 24 hours. So
I pulled up Europe. I want to show everybody what's going on there. These are the temperature anomalies. I actually went back to Monday. You can see much of Europe is above average, near or maybe just slightly below average in England. But watch as we go through the week. You're going to see that cold pool of air, this large area below normal temperatures that builds up in northwestern Russia and back over through Scandinavia, and then just sweeps southward across
Wow.
much of northern Europe and into England, so that by Sunday you're talking about temperatures that are on this scale at every bit of 10 to 15 degrees Celsius below average. Okay, so almost 20 degrees or more below average across Poland, Germany, into northern France, and through much of southern England, below normal temperatures through Ireland. And then it kind of stays that way into Tuesday and Wednesday of next week. And then gradually, I think, as we move toward the latter part of next week, we'll probably see a bit of a warm-up.
see, that's a bitter pill for the people who live in Europe, because at least right now they're enjoying some semblance of springtime, and all of a sudden you see the curtain being rung down on them with the sudden blast of cold weather. But at least they've had some mild temperatures to start. We here in the United States, at least going back to the very beginning of the month, have not seen any semblance of spring.
No, not at
or
all.
warm temperatures.
It happened all in February.
Yeah, I mean, and what if you recall, Joe, going back to the final week of February when we were basking in those mild temperatures, we were seeing two things happen. Number one, we were seeing the buildup of that big blocking pattern, and kind of we were wondering whether or not we were going to see at the turn of the month a sudden surge of cold weather return. And we were also hearing, if you remember, back in that final week of February, a lot of people, a lot of our viewers, not a lot, but some of our viewers saying, "This is it.
Yes.
Winter's over," and look where we are now. Now that
They're
we're
all in
halfway
hiding
through.
now.
I mean,
The snow production from this beast of the east, is a little bit less than, it's actually quite a bit less than what happened with the last one. The GFS is not really particularly bullish with snow amounts over England, although it does show some snow for this weekend for England, but not so much for Ireland. The eastern shores of Ireland, yes, but remember, in the last case, we had blizzards and record snowfalls in some areas. So this time around, we don't have the storm system coming up from the south like we had the last time. last time we had a low that came up from just east of Portugal. I think it was Storm Emma that did that, and came up while the cold air was around. And this time around, I think it's going. You can see it right here. There actually is a little bit of a low that develops. You start looking at these European maps, Joe, every day. You see weird things happen.
Right,
So
right.
if you look here, here's the high that comes back. It actually just drops down from the northeast. We're now into the weekend, and at this point they're getting. Look at this long easterly fetch running from Siberia straight across northwestern Europe
Right.
and over through England, and this is where you get those. They get those North Sea streamers that come in,
Right.
and there's the GFS. Now, this is for Saturday night. This is 6 a.m. Sunday, London time, and much of England and Scotland and even the east shores of Ireland getting some snow. But look at that. You see that little low that forms
Yeah,
right there
a little
in the English
curlicue.
Channel, and
Yeah.
then just drops southward,
Right.
and then kind of goes into the Mediterranean Sea. Once that plays out, weather conditions kind of calm down, and it looks pretty dry until something sweeps in off the Atlantic
how
late
does
next week.
Ireland, how does St. Patrick's Day look for Ireland?
St. Patrick's Day being Saturday for Ireland. Let's see, I'm just backing it up here. So it's Friday. So that cold air starts coming in. It's going to be a cold St. Patrick's Day, and this is at noon Saturday. I'll take a look at what the temperatures. The 2 meter that's the anomaly. I'm sorry. So let me put the 2 meter temperatures. Is that it? I can't. It's hard for me to see. Yeah. So these are the 2 meter temperatures. Now remember, we are
Yeah.
mid-March, so we're looking at temperatures that are basically in the upper 30s to around 40 for daytime highs,
Right.
and in some places in northern England, by the way, down in the 20s.
Hey, guess what? That's pretty much what we'll be looking at in the tri-state area this
Yeah.
upcoming weekend or whatever. So
And
misery loves company.
by 6 p.m., the temperatures are all below, still above freezing in all of Ireland, below freezing in all of England, and by the time we get to Sunday morning, 6 a.m., temperatures in the 20s in both Ireland and England.
Warm up the crumpets on Sunday morning.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so you know what? Now I'm going to switch back to the eastern U.S. so we could take a look. We should have enough going into Thursday to see what that wave does, and I'm doing it on the close-up now. So there's that. This is the low that comes out on Tuesday, and the snow gets to about central New Jersey and then stops, and then that second trough comes along, and now we're into Wednesday night, early Thursday morning. Well, it does give some snow here. Look at that.
Yeah.
Takes a low, kind of sits it there for a while, and then starts to finally kick it away to the northeast. So it would seem like the GFS and the European are a bit closer
Right.
late this afternoon. The European was very similar to this. The GFS is a little further north with its precip shield. So why don't we just for laughs, we'll just see what kind of snow it generates. Remember now, we are definitely at the time of year where for this to stick, unless it snows super hard, it's got to fall at night. But actually generates some fairly decent amounts for southern New England, central New Jersey southward, and particularly across southern Pennsylvania and northern Maryland. By the way, there's this huge gaping snow hole when you look at the snow totals across the eastern part of the United States. Everybody is above normal, pretty much from Georgia all the way up for the whole
I saw
season.
that. You put
And then
it
there's this
perfect.
little hole of below normal snowfall
Right.
that includes Washington, D.C., Baltimore, roughly, much of Maryland, and southern Pennsylvania. I hear from people from this area all the time telling me that.
It's like a dome, so to speak, a protective dome against snow down in that part of the United States.
So, obviously, we've got a lot to look at over the next several days. Again, I think it's pretty safe at this point. Each storm has had different impacts. We're going to have about 3 days of winds from the east and northeast coming in off the ocean, so that might produce some coastal flooding problems beginning on Tuesday. We are going to be going away from the new moon and
Right.
toward the first quarter, so that at least there won't be a moon moon impact.
The so-called neap tide, which occurs during the quarter phases, and of course the astronomically higher than normal tide coincide with both a new moon and a full moon. So new moon is tomorrow, and for the next few days we have a bit of tranquility to deal with. But about the middle of next week is when we're. And again, it's so funny because again, so much emphasis was being put on Tuesday, and now it's looking more like possibly it's going to be Thursday.
Yes.
And
or Wednesday night into Thursday.
Wednesday, Thursday. But again, who is to say, even at this distance now, whether or not what we just said a few minutes ago was like, well, this doesn't look like quite the potency of the storms we've already seen. Who's to say that that's going to change and that maybe the Thursday storm ends up being another monster?
Right.
That's certainly not out of the question. Or two, both systems, the one for Tuesday and the one for Thursday, kind of slither underneath us. And
Right, and the block could weaken a little bit faster, in which case the first system may come further north, and then the second one may come further north, and we wind up getting something fairly substantial from both. Hard to say. By the way, Timothy Veltman, I did check out the Weather Service Albany Facebook, their last post. I did see that picture from Woodford. Yeah, it was amazing. It's been snowing like crazy up there. If you go to on Facebook, go to the National Weather Service Albany Facebook page, and that was what I was talking about earlier with the snow up to the rooftops. Right. They posted that picture up on their page, and you can see it for yourself. I'm just running back. NEPA, ICA. You need Philly to be ground zero for one of these events. You know, Philadelphia is when you look at Philadelphia, a lot of times in these storms in the wintertime, they always somehow seem to be in a hole where Philly is in a kind of a funny place because geographically, because a lot of times when these storms come east, if they're coming east and they redevelop, right, the stuff from the west dries up before it gets there, right, and they're too far west to tap the development. New York City taps it some of the time, Long Island taps it more of the time, and Boston taps it most of the time.
Well, how could we forget the Boston area? What was it, 2-3 years ago, where they had like 103 inches of snow?
Yeah, for the season?
It's great, yeah. Crazy.
And they had, of course, from the storm from the other day, every bit of 18 to 24 fell in much of southeastern Massachusetts. Why does the GFS lack cold air? Joshua Pan with the lead shortwave. It doesn't really so much lack cold air. There is cold air in eastern Canada that's going to drain southward, and sometimes when those highs are to the north, that cold air winds up draining further south than what models are showing. They don't usually handle those big highs up to the north very well in terms of the low-level cold air. And Timothy Veltman also mentions a buddy of ours, Andy Gregorio, said he may have to retire if we hit the monthly record snowfall, 57.5 inches back in December of 1969 in Albany. They're getting very close to that. Yeah. A lot of places in upstate New York are and through New England are very close to setting all-time snowfall records for the month of March. If we get one more storm, they're going to be put over the top.
We don't necessarily are rooting for that. I know we were rooting for stuff like that to happen when we were a lot younger, but when you get up to our age, it starts getting tiring. But we'll see. Records. What do they say? Records were made to be broken.
That's correct. Reaver wants me to do my homework and make sure I check to see where the February temps rank in Central Park. I shall check that out. And you know what? I think at this point we could probably call it a night. So we have the Joe and Joe Show tonight at 9:15 on Facebook. So be sure to check that out. You can either go to Joe Rayo's Facebook page, Joe Rayo Weather, or you can go to mine, meteorologist Joe Chaffee, and that's at 9:15 Eastern Time. We'll have the rest of the GFS and maybe whatever new developments that occur between now and then.
Well, I'm not sure how much new developments will occur. It would be certainly a lot better if we were back on standard time and we could get a look at the NAM to almost completion. But unfortunately, the politicians have had the say, and we're still in the daylight mode or daylight saving mode. And here I am now all of a sudden starting to rant again. I ranted enough about this on Monday. We'll see. Hopefully things will come into a clearer perspective for the middle of next week. Maybe not tomorrow, but certainly by Monday, I hope.
14-15 was the year you were talking about with Boston. thanks to Timothy Veltman. William Huber, too bad didn't start in January or February, or there would be over 60 inches of snow on the ground. Well, sometimes I wonder when you translate a pattern seasonally and you try to say, well, if this happened 2 months ago, I don't know that it always translates the same way. We could have the same setup 2 months ago. You could wind up with the same temperature profile, although granted the sun angle is lower and you probably would have colder temperatures for sure. Or maybe the outcomes would have been about the same.
I think I made a mention back at the beginning of the season or whatever, or maybe it was in the middle of the season. I don't know when. People were saying, when are we going to get a nice block and when are we going to do? And I made the comment. I said it'll happen in April or May, and then we'll be talking about why couldn't this happen in the wintertime? Well, it's here. It's happened, and we've
it happens when it happens.
It happens when it happens, and we've already had 3 under our belt, and who knows what's going to happen in the middle of next week. We'll see how it all pans out.
Okay, so Reaver has a deeply personal question here. He wants to know if you use Just for Men, the hair thing.
Oh no, it's all
his natural
it's all
color.
my natural.
Every other week.
And
your colorist dyes the white and gray just perfectly.
it's not, and I never have used Grecian formula or whatever. People, we had
It's all about hair.
Mr. Cosgrove, Larry Cosgrove. Some of you may know who he is. He was on local television airwaves a while back. I think 10, 15 years ago on Channel 9 or whatever. And I met with him, and he said, "Can I ask you a personal question? Why don't you dye your hair?" And I've never dyed my hair. I've never used Grecian. I figured if it was good enough for Bob Barker, and Bob Barker made a sudden.
Yeah, he just let it go.
He just let it go. He came out one day and boom, everybody was like stunned. If it worked for Bob Barker and if it worked for Johnny Carson and those guys, the heck with it. What does it matter whether or not the
we could
forecast
spend our time coloring our hair, or we could spend our time looking at weather models. We go with weather models.
That's basically the story. So,
all right, folks, have a great rest of your evening and a great rest of your Thursday. We'll see you tomorrow here on YouTube, and again 9:15 p.m. Eastern Time on either of our Facebook pages. We'll see you guys either later or tomorrow.
Now time for lunch.
Yes.